So we're moving in on sermon 6 in this series about hell and death and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to look at sort of one of the moments that changes things again. So let's begin with the question that we've been building and building and building on. I hope it's not going too slow for you, but I want to make sure that we build this up really brick by brick. And that is, if the dead are in Sheol, and Sheol is silent and it's without thought and without awareness and it's about waiting, when do they live again? When do the dead live again? Because to this point, the Bible has only given us some hints. We've seen that God can raise. We see that Job expects to be remembered. We've seen that the dead wait. But now the Bible is going to speak quite directly, not hints and patterns, but really unmistakable language. And let's go and look at Daniel 12:2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So there it is. No ambiguity, although we can pull it apart. The dead are described as sleeping in the dust, and then they awake. And we've seen this, sleeping in the dust. That's exactly what we've kind of seen all along. The person is not active, not aware, not functioning. David in the Psalm says, you die like a sheep, and then God remembers you and awakens you. Now, this passage, notice, it introduces two extra things. Some rise to everlasting life, and others to shame and everlasting contempt. And this is where the Bible places judgment after resurrection. Now, that order matters. Death, sleep in the dust, awakening, and judgment. And that's because, as we started, many people believe death and then heaven or hell. But Daniel is presenting something different here. Judgment happens after resurrection, not at the moment of death. Now, it may be for you, and in death, if you don't know anything, it may, from your perspective, feel like it's immediate, but that's not the case. It won't actually be immediate. And there are some implications here. Think about it. If people are already alive in heaven or hell, as the traditional ideas lead us to believe, as Dante would lead us to believe, then resurrection is unnecessary. Why awaken someone who's already fully conscious and shod of that evil body if they don't actually need a body to be them? Why raise somebody who is already in their final state? But if the dead are truly asleep and the dead are truly dead, then you can see how resurrection is essential. Isaiah echoes this. In Isaiah 26:19, it says, your dead shall live. Together with my dead body they shall arise. Awake and sing, ye who dwell in the dust. Again, dwelling in the dust, and then they awake. Same pattern. So the language is consistent. It's consistent across different books of the Old Testament. It's consistent across centuries. The language remains the same. The dead are in the dust, the dead are asleep, and the dead then have to be raised. And so now we can sort of put it all together. There is creation, it leads to life. Death means taking the breath away and returning to the dust. Sheol is where you go and there's silence and waiting and unawareness. Resurrection with a new body means an awakening out of the dust, out of Sheol. And judgment will be the outcome after resurrection. So back to our common ideas here. Notice what is missing. There is no mention of immediate torment at death or immediate bliss at death. The decisive moment then is resurrection and then judgment. Now, there's one more detail here, and this is getting into the Greek. And as you go along and you do this kind of study, you'll see how important it is, because Daniel says everlasting life, and he says everlasting contempt. So one group gets life, one group gets this thing called contempt. And so life here is probably pretty clear. At least we have some idea about life. But what about this other thing? If they are not given life, then what is their final state? And we will come back to that. So now we have clear statements about resurrection. We have clear statements about judgment. We have clear statements about life being given, and still no clear idea about the wicked living forever in some sort of conscious torment. Instead, the language continues to revolve around life, death, awakening, judgment. And now we can move into the teachings of Jesus, which I'm sure you're waiting for. Because when Jesus speaks about this, he uses some pretty powerful, certainly if you were a Jew, very powerful and real imagery that everybody could understand. It's Gehenna. It's fire. Fire! Fire! It's destruction. And one point, one story that many people point to as a proof of this immediate sort of heaven and hell afterlife thing. And that is the story in Luke of the rich man and Lazarus. But this is a moment that we need to slow down, because this is so key to the argument for a heaven and hell, a sort of a more traditional idea of heaven and hell that really intelligent people put a lot of belief into.
Could we just have lunch? Because I don't know where you got that.
Because they see this story as a literal description of the afterlife. But is it? Or is something else happening here? So the question I will leave you with, other than you go and get stuck into the bosom of Abraham, is that the Bible clearly teaches that the dead are asleep. They return to the dust. They have no more breath. They are awakened, called out by God and in a body, and afterward they are judged. And so then the question becomes, what is exactly the fate of we'll call them the wicked, so non-believers after that judgment? Those people who are not raised to life, but raised to everlasting contempt. Because that's exactly where the idea of hell has to be examined. Not at the actual death, but at the end. Next time, we'll get into Gehenna and the bosom of Abraham. And until then, God bless.